Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Group Stage Mandala, the Living Mandala Workshop Series. So this workshop series is the brainchild and collaborative effort of myself and Mariah Chappell. We came up with this idea when she came here almost 2 years ago now, with Mariah's extensive knowledge of musculature and my knowledge of group improvisational formats. We thought that the pairing of our skill set would be a really good one. And so today I'm going to be focusing really on the group and stage mandala as it relates to the group improv format. Now, the format that I'm most familiar with is the Fat Chance Belly Dance format, otherwise referred to as the American Tribal Style format. For myself, I think of a person, an individual going through a group improv format as having different points of evolution that happen. You've got yourself as the individual that first comes into any particular class. And as a beginner, you're really focusing predominantly on the posture and the moves and really just feeling out what is belly dance. Sorry. Then as you're going through this process of evaluating for yourself, what is group improv? What is this belly dance thing, this journey that I've started on? You're also beginning to learn about the group, the formations. And so within the basic ATS, FCBD format, we've got our standard duets, trios, quads, and that sort of thing. As your journey continues, and again, this is my theology on improvisational style dance, as you start to move into that intermediate, as a person, when you're focusing on yourself, you're really starting to think more about your technique, your flexibility, your strength, wanting to really improve your dance. You're going from more gross motor movement with large muscles such as arms or legs, and now you're starting to focus a little more on your head, perhaps, or how much body wave am I doing, and that sort of thing. So that's when you're focusing on yourself. As you move into an intermediate group scenario and setting, really we're starting to focus more on cues. Are my cues clear? Can people read what I'm doing? From a transition perspective, do my transitions make sense? Are people catching on, or is there a lot of start and stop with that? And then just general clarity of moves. Is the move, there's no odd thing happening with the moves, because as all of you know, the FCBD format is really a format of rules and structure, because we are going to go out potentially and dance with other people. And so for improv, we need that ability to be able to communicate clearly. So it has some rigors to it to make sure that our movement communication is clear and we can dance with other people. By this point, most people have already exercised the three basic formations, like I said, your duet, your trio, and your quad. It's during this time, a lot of times, that we see dancers begin to introduce themselves into the community. And so they're starting to figure out, what is belly dance in a broader sense of the word? Is it, what's the difference between a group improvisational style versus a fusion style? What is it? What does it consist of? And who out in the grander world is doing this? And so they're really starting to move that way. And so as you see, we're kind of spiraling in towards the center of this Venn diagram. So from the perspective of yourself, as you become more of an advanced dancer, you're learning a lot more refinement. To me, refinement's really in the hands. It's things that are fine motor movements and what I call volume control. This is the notion that you're not doing the move as large as you can. You're not doing the move as small. You're figuring out the gray matter on which how to execute it. And you're really beginning that process and transition into utilizing the group improv format more as an art form and as a creative means or creative medium, and really beginning to understand your own body and technique therein. From a group perspective, this is from the advanced dancer's perspective, really, we're looking at a number of different concepts. We're looking at blending in. The goal in a group improv is not about standing out. You're not trying to dance over the top of other dancers. You understand your skill level as opposed to someone else that you're dancing with. And so you're dancing to the dancer who has the least amount of knowledge and skill, instead of doing the fanciest move that you can. So you're really understanding, how do we blend in as a unit? How do we provide cohesion on the stage when we get together? This is also when you're starting to evaluate and really look at what I'm considering complex formation. So from a complex formation, I mean like the V's, the dueling duets, the diagonals. It's possible that people also receive that during the intermediate, but now the practical application of those as it relates to the stage is becoming more aware in the advanced dancer's mind. And within the community, we're starting to transition from dancing for ourselves and within our troupe to really thinking about musicality. What's our audience perceiving when we get on the stage? How involved are we in the community? And what are we doing? From my perspective, as someone who has dancers and has a troupe, my perfect dancer is really in the center of each of these three items. It's not someone who's completely focused on themselves. It's not someone who's only worried about the group. It's not someone who's only worried about the community. It's someone who has the foresight to really see that it's the combination of all three of those areas that make up a really good dancer. So from a theoretical perspective, there's a couple of wonderful quotes that I have found out here, and then I'll kind of high level them for you. But performance cannot be saved, recorded, documented, or otherwise participate in the circulation of representations of representations. Once it does so, it becomes something other than performance. Performance becomes itself through disappearance. And then the other quote is, performance becomes a metaphysical category with its ephemerality that transcends a mortal body. And basically what these things mean to me is the performance is in the moment. Who you are as a performer, who the group is in that moment transcends, it changes. You'll never be that person ever again. And the metaphor that I've been using lately to express this is, imagine a river that goes over rocks. You're never seeing that same water traveling over those rocks again. It's never identical to what it was. So when you perform, there's a variety of factors that happen during that performance, which makes it unique and makes it so that it will never happen again. Even with choreography, the same thing applies. It doesn't matter if you choreograph something, it's not going to be the same, because you as a person are not the same in that moment. And even when it's recorded, I don't know about you guys, but I have had some wonderful performances that when recorded, I was very unhappy with the recording, but in the moment, the performance was amazing. And that's what I focused on. And it was the experience of it and with the connection to the audience. But the recording of it really became something else. It changed it, because maybe it changed as a result of editing, or because it's flat, or because you can't hear the audience response to it. But It's really something special to see a live performance. And so when I look at performance, I see performance as a sensory experience. It's really about, I mean, the primary vehicle of that experience is the eyes and also the ears for us because of music. And there also could be a perception that is involved in that moment as well. And secondarily, for me, I've actually had some performances where I can taste them, which sounds a little funny, but I legitimately can taste the performance. Sometimes I can smell it, because if you're performing outside, maybe that fragrance of the forest around you evokes a thought, it evokes a memory, it does something. And then also touch, the notion when you see something, does it make you feel like you can feel it, literally feel it on your skin, feel it in your hair, feel it on your body. So it's really a sensory experience. And there's a difference between why you want to dance versus why you want to perform. To me, why I want to dance is a very different motivation than why I want to perform. And it's important to understand your motivations, particularly as a performing artist, when you get on the stage, because when you're dancing for yourself, what you might do might be entirely different than when you're being viewed. And so really examining your motivations will help to sort of set your intent. So the idea is, when you have an idea come to mind, when something comes to mind, you can, an idea is in one's own head. It doesn't have words, it doesn't have shape, it doesn't have form. It's electrical in your mind. And so once you have that idea, that can help to bring your motivation on why you are performing. And then once you have that motivation, once you know what that is, then you can set your intent, and then you can structure what you do in an effort to try to convey the message. I have a much longer version of this presentation that is very, very long, and it has lots of different photos in it, because it's important to see art from other people's perspectives, because it might give you an idea of how to take that theory and that idea and make it practical. Because the reality is, when the audience experiences a performance, it has a couple of different perspectives. I mean, it might trigger a memory for them. It might trigger an emotion. It might transport them to a different time and place, or it could be strictly entertainment. And there's no right or wrong reason for a performance, and there's no right or wrong experience that the audience has necessarily from it. But the goal is to identify for yourself as a performing artist and as a dancer, what are you actually trying to show? Are you trying to evoke an emotion for someone? Are you trying to evoke a memory? Are you trying to transport them to some other time and place? Or are you just looking strictly to entertain? All of these have a place within our art, if you will. And we have roots to this within ATS with Masha Archer. Masha Archer considered dance to be moving sculptural composition. So the holding of poses and is just as important. That line, how is the line created? What makes the line interesting? And she also thought that it was solving geometric questions, which is absolutely what we're talking about with the living mandala. The notion of utilizing shape to convey the meaning beyond language. Most of you speak German. but you also speak English. But if you didn't speak either, and I didn't speak either, how would we communicate with one another? Well, there is a belief that geometry is the quintessential sort of universal language. It doesn't need a lot of explanation, and it doesn't have any particular words around it. So she thought it was solving geometric questions, which I love. And her belief was also that we're really trying to design something that we want to be seen. You know, she believed that what we do is really suited for theater and cultural events, and I hold dearly true to that belief. There is something about seeing our types of performances in group improv in the theater or at cultural events. These are, for Tamarind, the primary areas in which we perform. And again, she drew musical inspirations from many countries. And today you see that in a lot of what we dance to. And she also believed that the costuming, it demands the costuming to speak. So in other words, we were constructing something new for each performance, that the costume wasn't something that we just put on, that the costume itself becomes a living piece of the art as part of the performance. And so the improvisational aspect of the costuming is also there, because how you put that costuming together each time may really differ. And so from our perspective in the group dance, we really look at having components, right? We have a coin bra. Well, that coin bra could be used for multiple performances or not, right? We have different pantaloons, we have different skirts. How we put these all together is a construct for that particular performance. So even if you put the same costuming on in the same way, the performance is different. Or if you have the same performance because you choreographed it, you could wear different costuming and it still evokes something different to the audience. So kind of an interesting way to look at it. So we have roots to the mandala with all of these aspects from our source, Masha Archer. So when it comes to inspiration, most of you are pretty fortunate that you have Gabby as a leader. Gabby is very motivated by the same types of things. And so I think a lot of times that's why we talk about how we feel like we're sisters, because we have a lot of the same dreams. But think about that. The motivation, being conscious versus subconscious, there is the Jungian notion of a collective unconscious. And are we all tapping into that to a certain extent to find our inspiration? There are people who, have you ever noticed that sometimes people come up with the same moves at the same time, or the same types of costuming, or the same types of thing? So there could be some subconscious motivation that happens, or it could be conscious. In my case, a lot of my inspiration comes from dreams. I will wake up at 3 a.m. almost every single morning, and I get struck by a dream or some vision in my head. It happens to me. And so a lot of my things are subconscious. It could also be historical motivation. You know, maybe you're trying to demonstrate a particular point in time. You're trying to showcase something specific for whatever reason. One of our themes for this year had been Egypt and the pyramids as an inspiration point. So looking at our costuming and how are we building pyramids and things like that. So this year for us has really been a lot of Egyptian inspired history and dance items. Music is also very strong. I think for most of us, that tends to be where the vast majority of our inspiration comes from. We hear a fantastic piece of music and it drives us to a thought. So a very good way. Costuming, again, you might see something. I have a piece of costuming right now that is looking for a piece of music. I created the costuming came to mind, but I have not yet found the music that I want to use the costuming for because it's very specific. And the one that I think is most predominant for myself, aside from dreams, are shapes. I tend to dream in shapes. So I think that's why they're kind of connected to one another. And what are those, how are those shapes constructed? Can I utilize those? There's going to be a video coming out from my recent trip to Chile that takes these shapes and puts them to life within a performance. And I think it turned out really well personally, and it really demonstrates that living mandala. And then last but not least is color. Some of us dream in color, some of us don't. How does it change if we're using black and white versus utilizing a color instead? And so I have some photos for us to look at. So here's this lovely photo of Egypt, and thinking to myself, oh, what does this say to me? When I look at this, what does this make? You know, does it inspire costuming? Does it inspire music? Does it inspire moves? And what does it say? And I'll give you a moment to kind of look at. This one's fantastic. Again, this is a mandala. This is a representation, right? And it's, look at the vibrancy of the colors, the circles, the moving in, the transcendence of the soul as it moves through its journey. It's fascinating. Does this make you think of anything? And each of you might have something totally different that inspires you. Again, could be shapes, it could be color, it could be any variety of things. And the difference for me, the reason I wanted to put this slide in is because this one isn't just about shape, it's also about the lack of color, you know, or being in earth tones. How does that feel to you? What's the, you know, what does that do for you? You know what I mean? Some people are very drawn by color and some are drawn by earth tones. And does this make you feel like you're more in the dirt and connected with earth? With respect to the chakras, there are actually frequencies that are paired with each of the chakras. You can go out and do a lot of research on these particular items. But the utilization of tonal qualities of songs and what does it stimulate within you, the belief in chakras is really one of transformation and evolution, if you will, through your soul's journey, and always moving upward to reconnect into the greater spirit. And I personally believe that we all become spirit again with one another and sort of return there. And so to me, this is fascinating to look at how does it move from, you know, the root chakra through the body to the crown where it explodes out. And so the frequencies are successively are different but very interesting. And on top of it, there are those who believe that all things are connected. Music is connected to the stars are connected to us. And again, Mariah has a lovely lecture on the chakras and the sacred geometry within the body of the muscles and the heart and all of that. I won't be going into that today, but the notion that it's connected, that all of these things, shape, sound, geometry, the energy lines, that all of us are a reflection over and over and over again of the divine. And so when we see beautiful things, we're drawing down that divine nature, and evoking it within ourselves to give to others. Just some pictures on costuming, and the feeling that it kind of gives to each of us from color perspective and palette and things like that. I like the sacred geometry because there's the notion that all things start from a single point, and that there's a blossoming out of it, and how it grows and divides is in itself the transformation into life and into a higher spiritual existence. And so how those things fit together is I use these as tools to create interesting performances. I like to go through the geometry to show evolution. I had this idea for us, and maybe next year I'll get Gabby to let us take that one on. So we have to, at some point, move from our inspiration to the planning stage to actually be able to undertake it. Again, an idea is no good if you have, if you're not motivated to show it, but you also don't have the means to communicate it. And so part of what we do as we move from inspiration to planning is understanding the stage and movement on the stage. Most stages in America are what we call the picture frame stage. So it is a stage that is distinguished. It's got four corners. It's got a very clear opening to it. It has a back area. There's curtains. It's lit. It's our most traditional type of stage in America. And so when we understand, you don't need to know stage, like upstage, downstage, but I will say this: when you're trying to communicate to people, it is easier if you understand the staging so that you can communicate where you're going, where your movement is going to be. So in America, and I think probably also for foreign countries as well, our stages used to be what we call raked, so they were on a decline. So upstage literally meant up at the top of the incline, and downstage meant that it was down toward the bottom of the incline. And this staging, stage right, stage left, center stage, downstage, all of these are from the dancer's perspective, not the audience perspective. And sometimes that confuses people. So upstage right is oftentimes where in my studio we have to enter from. This might be the only place to enter. We have an upcoming performance, and the only way to enter this stage is either upstage left or downstage left, because there's no way to get through and around the back. So you need to understand what your staging is when you have a performance coming up, because this also plays with, are you visible on all four sides? Are you visible on only three? How are you getting on the stage? How are you getting off the stage? What sorts of interesting formations are going to be utilizing the entire stage? So it's good to know from a planning perspective how big a stage you're talking about, entrances, exits, where your audience is, how close are they going to be, what your lighting is, and things like that. If you're not a person who does your own performances, but someone plans them for you, or you have a choreographer, this is some of the factors that they take into account when they're looking at setting up a performance. From the standard ATS movement, we have duet movements, trio movements, and quad movements. And anybody who knows Tamarin knows that we like to dance with everybody on the stage. And because we like to dance with everyone on the stage, that sometimes means that we have 9, 10, 11, 12 people on the stage at any given point in time. Some of that will be restricted by the size of the stage that you are on. If your stage will only hold 3 people, then you can only do things with 3 people, unless you can utilize the floor in front of the stage. If you have one of the divine shapes is the crescent, and we actually utilize the crescent all the time. It's called our chorus. It's open, right? It's open toward the audience. It's that shape that draws in the energy, and that's why I like the chorus, utilizing the chorus. From a staging concepts perspective, I like to use levels. I use a lot of levels. So this is varying of heights. So, it could be some people doing floor work, some people just doing regular levels. There's what we call the clumping or the amoeba. And it dawned on us as we were teaching down in Chile that Tamarin uses clumping for the slow diagonal fade. The slow diagonal fade is in itself kind of a clumping type of technique. We're tightened in very closely to one another, and it builds anticipation. It also builds a notion of connectivity where we're very close with one another. So it's sort of this amoeba-like structure that is moving on the stage as a singular unit. Lineups. So lineups are great. We use them vertically and horizontally. They can frame the stage. It provides a lot of clarity of movement. It also offers opportunities for the ripple or the goddess arms. A lot of people see this one where you're stacked in a stage and there's arm undulations all the way down, and you see this lovely sort of goddess arms happening. So, and you can do different pathways for those. There's in to out, out to in, front to back to front, continuous. So you can move that ripple through. And then mirroring. Mirroring is great to create symmetry. We primarily use mirroring in the ATS format with the dueling duet formation. And then one underutilized technique, but is really effective for group improv, is the hold. The notion that you're holding in place, you're not moving. A lot of times the hold that we see is paired with the level, and so it becomes the sudden drop that we tend to see that hold being utilized. But it can be utilized in more places than that as well. And so when you think you have what you want to do ready, what we do, or what I do, I should say, everybody laughs at me, but it's very effective, is storyboarding the performance. So I will write down like a sports person would on a piece of paper. I will draw out what I want us to do for our group concepts. And I'll show you it here quick. So this lovely, somewhat chaotic looking mess of lines and things is actually a storyboard that I did for a performance where we were going to be utilizing 4 squares on a singular audience, which turned into 2 crosses, which turned into a big cross, and then a V, and then a lineup. So this actually means something to us. To other people, they think it's hieroglyphics, but it's actually how we storyboarded the formations in particular. And so you can also use a movement demo with objects. I tend to use my zills a lot. I'll put my zills on the ground and I'll move them around and say, okay, this is how we're going to do it. And then planning the pathways. So part of the other aspect of the storyboarding that you're seeing here is I'm planning our pathways. How are we going to move on the stage in an effort to get us to these positions? So that's where you see some of these arrows happening on this diagram, where it's clearly it's mapping out a pathway of some sort, like this wheel is turning in this direction, this is turning in this way, how are people getting on? So planning your pathways becomes really important, especially if you're on a very small stage. And oh, I have a spelling error there. You want to come prepared, but you need to be flexible too, because there's a possibility that when you have an idea that you're trying to draw down, that it may not work, even if you want it to. So one of the things that we encountered in Chile is the workshop space that we were dancing in. Literally, we had 33 people in the performance, and it literally took from one end of the room all the way to the other end of the room. That's how much space we needed to do a single lineup. It took that much room. No stage is going to accommodate that. In my case, I was under the impression that we were going to be dancing outside, but because of the rain, we had to make an alteration to where we were doing the performance at. And so as a result of it, it ended up very, very long, very, very long. And, but it worked because we were fortunate, but everybody was pretty much on top of each other. So understanding our spacing had to change. We had to change the angle of which way the room, how we were originally planning to use the room. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. All right. And with that, we have come to the end of the lecture. I have more things that I could talk about, but I'm going to leave this to us. Does anybody have any questions at all?